Hey peeps, welcome to another video. Today it is part 3 of the Vogue 8997 sew along, and today we will be finishing off the dress. So let's get started. To finish the centre back seams of the skirt and the lining with some bias binding, so I'm going to sew those on now. Then we can attach the skirt to the outer bodice and the lining to the inner bodice, which again is different to the pattern instructions. I have sewn the right side of the binding to the wrong side of the skirt. I have kept the raw edges even, and then I have sewn in the ditch of the binding to attach it to the skirt panel, and I am now wrapping the binding around the raw edge to cover it up. I'm using my edge stitch foot because it has this guide here which I can run up against the edge of the binding to give myself a nice straight line of top stitching. You can get edge stitch feet which will allow you to do this with all the fabric to this side of the foot, but I only have a blind hem foot, so I'm using that. Got my needle moved all the way over to the left, so with my forefinger of my right hand I'm pushing the fabric nice and flat, and with the forefinger of my left hand I'm wrapping the binding around and pushing that flat. And then you want to make sure these fingers are keeping everything nice and flat so that you don't get any ripples in the fabric. And the edge of the foot is running against the edge of the binding to keep the top stitching nice and straight. Any stray threads from the fabric you want to kind of enclose in the binding, and then backstitch at the end, and I'm going to do that for both sides of the dress and also for the lining. Okay, as I mentioned, they want you to put the skirt and the lining together and then attach it to the bodice, but I want to attach my lining to my bodice lining and my skirt outer to my bodice outer. So the next thing that we're going to do is we're going to put the right sides together of our skirt and bodice, and we're going to match the centres and seams and stitch, and we're going to pivot at the large circle in the centre, and then we're going to press the seam up towards the bodice, and we're going to do the same for the lining. I have pinned the skirt to the outer bodice, and I have matched up the notches on the sort of centre front panels, and I have also matched up all of the seam allowances, and again you want to match that at 5/8 of an inch. The seam allowances on some of these side panels won't match at the actual raw edge, so we're going to sew all the way along here at 5/8 of an inch, pivoting at this center point, and I'm going to sew with the bodice side up so that I can make sure that I am pivoting it exactly the center point. This giant mass of fabric is now technically a dress. I have sewn the lining to the lining bodice, the skirt lining to the lining bodice, and the outer to the outer. I'm now going to go and press these seams up towards the bodice, then I can put in my zip. It's probably a really good idea to try your dress on before you put your zipper in. I have tried mine on, and I'll be sewing my zipper in at 3/8 of an inch just because it is a little snug in the waist, and I want to make sure that I have enough ease to actually wear this comfortably. So try your dress on at this stage and then we can sew in the zipper. So I've got my invisible zipper ready, I've got my invisible zipper put onto my machine, and I'm going to get it installed. So I have my zip in. There are lots of different methods for putting in zips. I'm going to link to a couple of my favorites in the description box down below. So you remember we left an inch of the lining free from the bodice. We're going to sew this up, and then we're going to finish the understitching of the lining to the seam allowance to just finish up this back edge. Then we can stitch the lining to the zipper tape to finish up that edge and close up the back seams. Got the remainder of the neck edge pinned right sides together, sandwiching the zip in place, and we are going to pick up our stitching line from this one here, 5/8 of an inch, and sew off the edge here, and then as I say we're going to continue the understitching as well, so I'm going to do that for both sides. You can see here I've finished off the neckline and the understitching. The next thing I'm going to do is I am going to put the lining to the bodice, or the lining to the outer, right sides together, and then I am going to stitch along the zipper to secure the lining into place, and I'm going to do that for both sides. I've got the right sides together and the zip sandwiched in between. I have my regular zipper foot on and my needle moved over to the left, but it's not all the way over to the left because I don't want to sew right up to the zipper teeth, which is what this line of stitching is. I just want to secure the zipper tape to the lining of the dress. So I'm going to sew all the way up to the neckline. I'm going to do the same for the other side. Okay, so I clipped the corners and then turned the lining and the dress the right side out so that the zip was finished at the top, and I've closed the zip, and I'm now going to close up the back skirt seam and do the same for the lining. So I've pinned everything together. I still have my zipper foot on. This time I've moved my needle all the way over to the right as far as it will go. I am going to stitch from the base of the zipper all the way down to the hem. I'm not going to be able to get right up to the line of stitching from the zipper, so I'm going to overlap it by about 1/2 inch, and I'll show you what that looks like when I've finished. But I'm going to stitch all the way along the bottom, along this back edge down to the hem to finish off the back edge of the dress, and I'll do exactly the same with the lining. I think you can just about see here, this is the zipper sewing and this is the back seam sewing. I've sewn the back seam together down to the hem at 5/8 of an inch so I can press that open. I'm going to repeat the process with the back of the lining and do exactly the same thing. Okay, so I'm going to go and press these back seams open and then I can start hemming the lining, and I'm going to do that with a rolled hem. And then I can sew on bias binding to the lining of the skirt, and I will finish that by hand. I'm starting the hemming process by sewing the bias binding to the skirt outer. I'm sewing the right side of the binding to the right side of the outer skirt, matching up the raw edges and sewing in the ditch of the binding, which I can then press round to the wrong side later. And I'm doing this first because I can, as I say, once I've sewn this, I'll then sew a line of stitching on the lining, and then I can take everything up to the ironing board and press it all at once. So I've sewn a line of stitching 3/8 of an inch away from the raw edge, and I'm going to press up there and then press it again to enclose the raw edge and make a rolled hem. So I'm going to go to the ironing board and do that now, and I'm also going to press the bias binding on the outer hem round to the wrong side so that I can hand stitch that into place later. I have folded and pressed along the line I'd stitched in, and then I folded that hem in again, and I'm now going to top stitch that down. I can then hand hem the outer hem, and I will also tack down at the seams of the waist the lining to the outer fabric, and then we are done. If you have any questions at all, please let me know in the comment section down below and I'll do my best to answer them for you. I hope you've enjoyed today's video. If you have, please give it a thumbs up. If you haven't yet, please subscribe, and I'll see you again very soon. Bye!